Hello everyone, good morning, and welcome to Luxembourg. Welcome to this beautiful hall and this wonderful venue. I can't see all of you because it descends into darkness quite soon. But I love the fact that some people are using the chairs very close to the stage, so there are some free, so please feel free to come closer and sit closer to the stage because we really want you to be involved. And of course, through the course of the panel discussions, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. That's what it's about, so to get you involved. So welcome to the 5th edition of Space for Inspiration, gathering all sorts of players in the sector. And I know some of you have been here for the course of the week. There's been other space events on through the course of this week in Luxembourg as well. It's lovely to see some faces I've got to know through the years of this space economy growing and burgeoning. And of course, there's new faces and people participating in the sector as the economy grows and grows. And of course, it's all to do with the commercialization of space exploration. My name's Lisa Burke, and I'm happy to be your host for today and tomorrow, and I will do my very best to answer any questions on behalf of the organizational team through the course of the next couple of days. Of course, it also falls to me to ask you to try to have your phones on silent if possible. You don't all need to be told this anymore. We do have, as you can see behind me, a QR code for any questions or comments through the course of the day. I would prefer audience interaction. I much prefer it if there will be people who could raise their hands with a roving microphone when we have panel discussions, then just to say who you are and where you're from, because I just prefer that. I think it also engages other people and people can come up and talk to you, getting to know who you are and which organization you're from as well. But if you don't feel comfortable with that, of course you can use Mentimeter. We have the Wi-Fi Space Week 2024, password LU Space Explorer. And other than that, we want to just tell you also the presentations will not be made available, but there will be a recording of this. It's not being streamed. There will be a recording, a video recording, and that will be made available to you. But if you want any pictures of slides or you want the slides, I suggest you talk to the speaker in person at the event. Speakers, if you could just go to the sound booth through that door to get your microphone 30 minutes before you're on stage, that would be wonderful. And of course, all of this depends on sponsorships, so we are immensely grateful for the sponsors. You can see them here. Luxembourg Space Agency is the co-host of this event. And of course, then we have Redwire Space, the exploration company, Vast Space, Flawless Photonics, iSpace, Tetspazio, Exobiosphere, and a core group will be the hospitality partner, and they will be the host of the dinner tonight. We will give you more information on the dinner tonight, which starts at 6:30 in the Sofitel Hotel. I will come back to details there because somebody from the organizational team has managed to be very specific. It's 190 meters away. We need to be very careful with measurements in this economy, and it's not to be confused with the downtown Sofitel. So it's the Sofitel, which is very, very close to us. But that's enough from me. I would love to move on to the event and the presentations, and we're going to start with a presentation video from Daniel Neuenschwander.
Dear colleagues, dear partners, taking part in the annual conference on commercial space exploration would have been a great opportunity. I couldn't make it, but I'm thrilled to share a few thoughts with you. First, highlights 2024. We had a very good start. We had really a landmark this year by the first commercial astronaut mission to the International Space Station with Marcus Wan's mission, which the European Space Agency supported. We changed the game in terms of pace of implementation of programs. On top of that, we had our contributions to Gateway. We had phase 1 of Moonlight. We had our delivery of the European Service Module number 3. And last but not least, we also had our first experience on the surface of the moon with Niels. All these achievements are your achievements. And it allows us to go the next steps towards commercial growth. Here we have projects like the LEO Cargo Return Service, which started also this year, We have 2 companies who are working on the LEO cargo return service today to really go the next step, which really allows us to have a new service procurement, a service approach in the way we are doing contracts with the community. But we have also the BSGN, the Business in Space Growth Network, in domains like health, like biotech, and space resources. Last but not least, next year, the Ministerial Council 25. CM25 is critical in confirming Europe's long-term exploration goals. Europe has a plan. We have a 15 years plan with Explore 2040. Now it's time to go the next step for more research, more astronaut missions, more economic growth. I thank you for your dedication, which is absolutely key in implementing our shared vision for exploration in Europe. We are building together the future that is innovative, that is inclusive, and of course collaborative. Thank you very much for your engagement for a responsible, sustained, and sustainable exploration in Europe.
And now we have Marc, who is the CEO of the Luxembourg Space Agency.
No, I am speaking. So, good morning, everyone, and let me welcome you as well here in Luxembourg. It's of course a great honor for us to partner with ESA and host this 5th edition of the Space for Inspiration conference here in Luxembourg. So as Lisa shortly mentioned, this conference is also part of the Space Week here in Luxembourg, and we had a number of other events taking place here and still taking place here. For example, the Moon Village Workshop and Symposium that took place the last 2 days, New Space Europe yesterday, and over the week we have also the European Interstellar Symposium. So this Space Week gathers more than 1,000 people during these 5 days, and they will talk about the Moon, space for Earth, commercialization and interstellar travel. This is truly a unique setting. So I take the opportunity to tell you very shortly what Luxembourg is doing for those who don't know. And many people have somehow discovered Luxembourg in 2016 when we announced the Space Resources.lu initiative. But in reality, Luxembourg has started its activities in space already in the middle of the 80s, with a very clear ambition to create a new economic sector in Luxembourg. And that started with the creation of SES, a satellite operator that is today one of the leading satellite operators around the world. Another important milestone was in 2005 when we joined as a full member the European Space Agency, which was a really important step to support the development of our ecosystem. In 2016, as I mentioned, we announced our visionary initiative on space resources, and in 2018, the government created the Luxembourg Space Agency. So our policy has been updated now in 2022 and is based on 4 pillars around sustainability. But what is very important here is to mention the core motivation of this strategy is to diversify the economy. So that's very important. I think this is quite unique. There are not so many countries that have put that as the main driver of their space policy. And that means also that we are really supporting commercially driven activities here in Luxembourg. Also important to mention is, of course, as I mentioned, the whole story started in the middle of the 80s. That means that now the government is supporting this development since more than 30 years. This is a long-term commitment that is necessary to develop this new economy in a country. So the 4 pillars or priorities of our strategy can be structured in 4 elements. The first is sustainability on Earth, and I believe in other conferences or yesterday, we have shown a few use cases where space is really bringing a very important added value for other sectors. Sustainability in space. You certainly know that over the last few years, humanity has launched more satellites than over the last 60 years of history in space. So we are entering in a completely new era of operations in space, and that of course brings new challenges and new opportunities as well. And Luxembourg will want to be part of this new era of activities in space. Third pillar is sustainability in the use of space resources. So this is really one particularity of Luxembourg, having put this topic so high on the agenda, but definitely this is a topic that we see as a very strategic element for the next decades, and we need to start working on it. We need to have these capabilities in Europe as well. And last but not least, I mentioned it already, the economic sustainability is very important. If you want to have an ecosystem with an economy that works, you have to have companies that are self-sustained, that are profitable, and that means that we need to have this sustainability from an economic point of view as well. So obviously the missions of the LSA are aligned with this strategy. So first of all, we support this economic growth. We are support of industry here. We help them developing their ideas, their business, finding funding, de-risking their technologies, etc. Talent development is also a very important, a critical element if you want to develop this ecosystem. So we have, and I will give a few figures later, have had an extreme high growth here in Luxembourg, and it means that the companies also need the right skilled people to do that. And so this has been also one of the missions, or is a mission of the Space Agency. And near to that, of course, the international engagement. This is also an important aspect. Space, a lot of things you cannot do that simply alone in your corner, and so it's very important as well to be engaged on international level. A quick word about our initiative on space resources. The objective of Luxembourg is to contribute to the peaceful exploration and sustainable utilization of space resources for the benefit of humankind. So this is not an easy task, and we have identified a number of challenges that we have to tackle, like technical aspects, like regulatory aspects, business aspects as well, even though this is a long-term endeavor, we look at it as well as a potential economic opportunity, and of course the financial aspects. And to do that, we have structured our work in 5 strategic pillars to address specifically these 4 challenges. I want also to say a word about one important pillar of our strategy. And as I mentioned, this is a long-term vision. You need to create a lot of new knowledge of capacities, of technologies. And we have created in Luxembourg the European Space Resources Innovation Center, which is really something unique. You will find nowhere in the world a center like that that is dedicated to the development of the utilization of space resources. And we are very proud that we could already have ESA as a strategic partner to develop that. And the last years have shown that there is a momentum, and we keep this momentum. There is a significant growth of the center. We have recently renewed the arrangements with ESA and also the funding engagement of the government, so that we have now plans that are stable and robust until 2029. So ESRIC first mission is, of course, to develop the research aspects, developing these capabilities that are industry relevant and have state-of-the-art facilities. So this is really meant to generate and create the next generation of engineers and scientists capable in this domain. We have not forgotten commercialization. Again, it's a long-term endeavor, but nevertheless, we think about it already today as a commercial opportunity. So there is also a startup support program that we run also together with ESA, and I think there will be announcement also on that today. And last but not least, because this remains a small community, you need to motivate, bring all these forces together. And so they also have as a mission to connect researchers, entrepreneurs, industry, investors around this topic. And to do that, I want to mention also an important event that we organize in Luxembourg every year. It's the Space Resources Week that will also take place next year here in Luxembourg. So I said I would give you a few figures. So all these efforts that we have been doing now over the years have led to an ecosystem with about 80 companies and research labs active in space here in Luxembourg, employing about 1,400 people. So I encourage you to make a comparison with our neighbor countries, considering, I would say, the scale, of course, because we are much smaller than our neighbors. But I can tell you that we can be proud of what we have developed over the years. Without SES, of course, SES is one of the big players here in Luxembourg. But if you look at the rest of the ecosystem, over the last 5 years, the sector size has doubled in terms of number of companies, in terms of people employed in this sector, and also in terms of revenues. So there is really a momentum existing, and we are pushing to continue and work and develop the ecosystem in that direction. So I hope I was able to, in a very short time, give you an overview of what we do here in Luxembourg. Again, on the one hand, the strong commercialization support, and on the other hand, the long-term vision on the utilization of space resources. So the Space Week is a perfect place to discuss, share your experiences, and think together about how best meet challenges of the future. So I wish you these next days full of meetings, sharing ideas, and developing new projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marc. Thank you so much. And now it's a great pleasure to invite to the stage Bernhard Hufenbach, who is the head of commercialization and the innovation team at ESA ESTEC. Bernhard.
Good morning, esteemed guests, colleagues and friends, and welcome again to the 5th edition of the Space for Inspiration Conference. ESA organized in close collaboration with our colleagues from the Luxembourg Space Agency. We are fueled by our sponsors, and we organize it in a European Convention Center here in Luxembourg. Over the next 2 days, we will explore the frontiers of commercial space exploration and innovation. The Space for Inspiration Conference has come a long way since its inception. We had the first event in 2016 held in London. Since 2016, the commercial space sector has grown enormously in terms of scope and significance. The objective of the Space for Inspiration Conference are multifaceted. Firstly, we want to highlight the importance of commercial space for advancing the global space exploration endeavor. We want to create opportunities for partnership building and networking. That's why we like see you talking in the corridors and really build teams. We would like to address topical themes and challenges as you propose them to us. So the program to some extent is shaped based on the input we have received from the community. And we want to call for action. Action in Europe to accelerate commercial space exploration, to enlarge the European footprint in the emerging LEO and lunar economy. The global space exploration landscape is evolving really rapidly in the recent years, and commercial space exploration, commercial activities have never been more crucial. Commercial services enable today to send humans to low Earth orbit and cargo, and to reach the moon with payloads and perform robotic operations. In the foreseeable future, we will have commercial services for human-tended stations, automated platforms in low Earth orbit, and we can even reach probably the moon based on a commercial service with human and operate humans on the moon with commercial service like telecommunication and navigation. But there are very significant challenges which face the progress in commercial space exploration. And just to mention a few, still the high cost of accessing space and operating in space, the access to financing, some unclarity about the regulatory environment, the new need to think about sustainability of space exploration and space activities in general, and particularly the uncertainty about the private sector demand for all these new services and the ability to scale business models. These challenges have been discussed since 2016 at these events, and they will be certainly discussed again. I think we can all note quite some progress, particularly in the space transportation environment. The emerging of reusable launchers, commercial service for crew and cargo, and payloads to the moon have increased the frequency of accessing space while reducing cost. And we all follow the exciting demonstration missions of Starship, which, if successful, will introduce further revolution in space transportation. I'd like to make you aware of one specific session we included in our program on in-space refueling, which will also address future innovation to enable deep space transportation at hopefully reduced cost. There have also been action taken all across Europe to improve access to financing by leveraging public-private partnerships, creating dedicated investment funds, and stimulating venture capital and equity investment in the commercial space sector. The regulatory environment and sustainable space remains a very important challenge. It is also for this reason that we include a special session on space law to discuss this matter with the experts. I would like to invite you to focus on one challenge which is kind of at the root of all commercial activities and which I see more and more appearing in discussions within the community. And that is a question where there is private sector demand for all these services and whether all the business models we're currently learning about are really scalable in the future. The sessions on the BSGN industry accelerators, the health beyond gravity and in-space manufacturing today, and tomorrow on future commercial LEO multi-user facilities and the evolution of LEO, will zoom in on some markets which may be enabled by access to space and by performing applied research and production in space. So I would really like to try to ask you to answer in all these discussions 3 simple questions. Which markets may scale in the next 10 years? What needs to be done to unlock the market potential? And how can we ensure that Europe has a strong foothold and footprint in these emerging markets? Some of the project initiatives we discussed today will deliver new services and products, some of them directly relevant for existing terrestrial markets, and if successful, they can completely transform entire industrial sectors. I look forward to insightful presentation, engaging discussion, and fruitful collaboration that will emerge from this conference. Thank you, and let us begin with 2 days of inspiring and constructive dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bernhard. And he is going to be on the first panel discussion of the day. And this is entitled The Status of the LEO Economy. I feel like since there is a place to walk, I should walk, and then I get closer to everybody. And then I can see people, because I really want to have audience engagement. Yes, we do have the Mentimeter. Yes, I will be keeping track of it, but I would much prefer you to have your hand up so that people with their roving microphones can come about. So it's the LEO economy from an agency market perspective, which has just been alluded to by Bernhard. And I would like to invite to the stage our panelists, who are Bernhard Hufenbach, also Hermann Ludwig Müller, who is the director of ESPI, Jaroslav Todt, the Innovation Finance Advisor at the EIB, Pierre Festal, the president of Promus Venture, Jose Salgado, Chief Marketing Officer at Space Comma Matters, and Raphael Röttgen, who is the co-founder of Prometheus Life Technologies. So welcome to all of our panelists. And yeah, thank you. I feel like we're missing some people. We have somebody missing, I think. Oh, well, never mind. We can carry on as we are. So this is really about the emerging LEO economy, and definitely, as you mentioned on point 3, highlighting the role of Europe, which is very, very important. We haven't really mentioned, but perhaps in its absence of mentioning it, a lot of this is driven by US policies. And we want to discuss the missions of human infrastructure in LEO and what will also happen post-ISS, which is another thing. So, Bernhard, since you've just been talking, you must have some views on your own questions.
The scalability.
Well, you posed 3 questions. I've written them down.
Yeah. Yes,
which markets are you interested in?
I think today we see quite some industry-driven interest in certain markets which try to leverage the ISS today, which is one of the only platforms available for commercial activities. And that's why we put in place some accelerators, and these markets clearly are health, in space production, new materials, and maybe sustainable food and agriculture. We see quite some interest, in particular in the health market, to demonstrate new use cases. And that's very positive, and we see private sector investment in enabling these use cases. We will hear a lot of ideas in this conference about future activities. I think the real question is how we transform these interesting use cases then in a scalable business model, where we need to ensure that there is more frequent access to space and even reduced cost of operations. I think we'll also hear some ideas there. But I'm not sure we have today a company which really makes significant profit in space, and that's something we need to see in the next 3 to 5 years.
But the problem is it takes an awful lot of time to get there because the infrastructure is quite complex.
Yeah, and I think that's a bit the challenge we have, because we need to stimulate demand and enable the offer, creating new service at the same time. And that at a stage where the market is not yet really fully existing. So I think institutions have a strong role to play here to support and fuel the market development.
Thank you. I have to also point out that you are from a space agency, so you're wearing the hat of ESA here on the platform. How do you view the role of ESA in this movement?
Well, ESA has, of course, its own strategy, and I think the strategy today is driven by the idea to enable and extend human presence to Moon and Mars, of course, starting low Earth orbit. The whole program a couple of years ago was all focused on ISS. That was the only program existing, and that's really changing. So I think in relative terms, the investment in LEO will become much smaller than the investment in future Moon capabilities and even robotic Mars missions.
The money people are arriving. I was going to make a joke about the people who are absent on the stage, but welcome, welcome. You've always had a very good week here so far.
Good morning, Lisa.
Very, very nice to have you here. I'm sure our wonderful audio Valentin will set you up with a microphone. Sorry.
But I think ESA has still a very strong interest in low Earth orbit as well. We need low Earth orbit for develop and demonstrate new transportation capabilities. Daniel mentioned our cargo transportation system, which is first serving ISS. We need to de-risk deep space missions to Moon and Mars by demonstrating habitation and learning how to manage health of astronauts. We want to enable the use of LEO for science, applied research, production in space. And of course, we want to maintain a strong European astronaut corps. So we have ourselves an interest to maintain LEO as an important destination, but our funding will be less. So we have a strong interest in enabling a market where we will become one of many customers to enable the achievement of our program objectives.
I'm writing down the word de-risk because that's a word that investors always want to hear. I'm going to jump directly actually to Jose actually because I know that in your work you're looking at the markets, the applications, and so what do you think might emerge and be scalable, which is so very important?
Thank you, Lisa, for that question. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Before I jump into giving like a futuristic forecast of what's going to happen in the future, well, we don't know, number one, we don't know for sure. But I want to say before, like, a little bit of our experience of when you were saying, like, as Space Commerce Matters, what we do every day is to create new markets. We are the bridge between space, LEO activity, and terrestrial companies. So we knock on the door of these pharmaceuticals or these agriculture companies, new materials, and identify where their process can be better, cheaper, faster in space. So that's what we've been doing for the past over 5 years with the heritage from the ISS National Lab. So that is interesting because it put us in a position where we actually working very close with commercial service providers, with commercial LEO destinations. So we are working every day with these people, and we see the struggle. But at the same time, what I want to say is that we also been working with the space agencies. And we have an interesting example that I want to bring, which I think envisions and embodies what Bernhard was talking about. We are, for example, seeing this example, of a re-entry vehicle that is produced by ESA. And the new paradigm they're approaching, instead of saying, let's give the money to industry and let industry do it privately, they are taking the risk, not just technically, and this is where the innovation comes, but commercially. So they are also working on the interface, which I think the BSGN, for example, is part of that. They are taking the risk using public money with the commercialization of it. So that is extremely interesting because what it means is that they are helping to what we do, which is creating new markets, which eventually are going to help to all of us, because it has to be a market-driven exploration. The days of building it and they will come should be over. They're not there yet, but we're getting closer. So we definitely, with these new LEO activities, we're going to see a surge in different, very interesting and very specific technologies. And before I jump again into that, let's say that it's fascinating for me to speak in terms of future, because all this commercialization talk that you start, for example, with the BSGN, you mentioned 2016, it started in an environment where the ISS was the only platform in low Earth orbit capable to sustain any kind of conversation about commercialization. And funny enough, ISS was never meant to be a commercial facility, experimental, research, study. So we were having a conversation without the resources. But as Bernhard was saying, that is changing. And we have great examples of companies, for example, who are understanding this future in a way that we will not be manufacturing the big pieces in space and getting them down. But we are getting the seeds, we are getting the crystals that will help, for example, seed materials. We're getting the seed materials for semiconductors that we can replicate, study here on Earth, and increase the value of the whole semiconductor chain or advanced materials in that regard. We have, for example, crystallization, where we do that part of the drug discovery. So we're not going to develop the whole pharmaceutical laboratory in space, but we're going to develop part of it and then bring it down. We already have a few companies like that in the US, for example, doing artificial retina. I think that's the one that we can probably follow the closest. Still has not turned a profit yet, but it's soon getting to that place. So I would see
soon
that...
being how long? Because we mentioned here, Bernhard said, within 5 years, which is the magic number for investors. Soon is what?
Well, I haven't talked to them directly, so I don't know their forecast exactly, but the numbers are looking much better because they're not ISS dependent. They will not be ISS dependent. I think we're going to definitely, all the numbers on the charts are going to change for everybody as soon as we start seeing re-entry vehicles operating on a regular basis. So I think within that 5-year period is when we're going to see not just European, but also the American re-entry vehicles. That's going to be a game changer. That is going to change the numbers for everybody.
So I'm actually an investor in this company. It's called Lambda Vision. And so what I understand, this is a regulated product, right? Because they're basically injecting artificial retinas into people. So just because of the regulation, this is going to take a few years. But this will happen. The company's doing very, very well.
Well, it's very nice to have somebody who is an investor. You know the time scale there yourself. Well, how fortunate that you happen to be on the panel to answer the question. Brilliant.
Good thing I showed up, finally.
Very good thing. I won't ask where you both were, but I'm sure you're doing important business somewhere else. Herman Ludwig, I want to turn to you now as Director of ESPI, because you will have a handle on the role of European industry in this area, and I'd love you to talk to us about your vision for that.
Yeah, we just recently did a survey on industry when Trump and Musk appeared on stage. And we asked the question, is this good or bad? Now, the good news is that 60% of industry thinks this is an opportunity, which is really remarkable. And I think it's a unique option of us getting going on something where we need to scale up. It is a challenge. It can be a challenge because competition will be more aggressive. Regulation will probably see some downturn. You will get from government to government, into government to business and business to business. The time of barter agreements and all the likes, it's maybe changing. So on the other side, is it something where we can really scale up? And I want to come back to what you said very initially, de-risking. I would turn this around and say, let's talk about certainty. What the whole system needs is certainty. What the public hand can provide is certainty. In a time when the market is uncertain, by definition, and timescales of 5 years may not be enough, we discussed this yesterday. So you have to have a trusted partner, reliable partner, who's ready to take a risk, to give certainty to people to invest, companies to continue to exist and get the financing. And you have to also get away from a paradigm where everything is a user requirement and you build against specification. This is building against market opportunity with all the uncertainties that are inherently in it. But to summarize, the most important part for the industrial ecosystem, but for the whole ecosystem, is certainty. And I believe this is something that agencies can provide.
Well, certainty is a very, very interesting word when it comes to what we're trying to talk about here. I mean, do you use the word certainty a lot in your work, Bernhard?
Not today, but I understand what you're saying. I think there needs to be a clear commitment, a stable framework, a stable program funding. Certainty doesn't mean the direction is clear, but certainty of support. I think I can underline that as well.
Okay, I'm writing down these words: stable, certainty, de-risk. Okay, we're going to have a little word cloud by the end of this. Jaroslav, the EIB, a center of money. You think about the investments, very, very careful. Where does the EIB and other commercial banks, the EIB is not exactly a commercial bank, European Investment Bank, just over the road, for anybody who wants to look at the building from the outside, they've got higher security than we have here to get in. You need to give away most of what you have in your possession to enter the building. But also, EIB commercial banks, how can you help the growth of the LEO economy?
Right, thank you so much. So indeed, I liked very much what I've heard from the previous speakers. We like the word certainty, and it made me think of something. I wasn't planning on mentioning it, but banks, including us, we walk a fine line. We try to finance interesting projects, but at the same time protect the money of our depositors. And if you put 100 euros in your account, you expect to see there at the end of the month. But most people don't understand the degree to which, we have to be prudent. And if I asked you, would you, if we invest in a company, before investing, how certain do we have to be to get the money back before we invest? I don't know if any of you would like to venture a guess if it's 50, 70, or 80%. The number is around 99%, between 98, 99.5. 98% is already considered risky. Okay, so this is just for you to understand. But that's why I really liked what some of the colleagues mentioned here is the public-private partnerships, de-risking. So those are the avenues that I think we will be going. Now, what does this mean for us, for a banker? And I'll try to speak about commercial banks and then also what EIB can do, because we can take a bit more risk. I would say to support the economy and to have those kind of likelihoods that we mentioned, we could work with large primes that obviously do some investment in LEO or new LEO economy, or we could work with maybe new companies, but that they also have terrestrial applications, terrestrial clients. So I can think of course, like mining resources. I can think of energy generation and others. Of course, communication is an obvious one. This is one type of avenue. Another type of avenue would be, as we mentioned, de-risking, public-private partnerships, and we are currently actually exploring various options with local and multinational players, if we could channel funds through them or with guarantees, etc., which would allow us to inject substantial funds. But maybe I'll go to the most interesting part. Like, if you're a company that's developing a product and you have maybe already raised venture capital money, and you're saying, at what stage can we transition to bank financing? I would say that ideally, you would already have your technology risk covered, and you would have stable revenues, cash flows, and so your commercial risk would be also very, very minimal. But in reality, this is very difficult to achieve. So maybe I can give an example of some of space companies that we finance, new space companies over the last 7 years, and at what stage we were able to enter. I'll give an example of a constellation. So if you have, for example, a constellation that would comprise 20 or 30 satellites, typically no banker, no one beyond venture capital will probably invest in the first couple of satellites because you're still testing the technology, you're testing communications with ground stations, etc. But once those satellites are in orbit, maybe someone who can take quite a lot of risk, someone like EIB, we can finance then the rest of the constellation, and then maybe traditional commercial banks could then finance either replenishment or maintenance or things like that. So this is more or less my view of how we could be doing that.
Could you just clarify, you said the EIB can take a lot of risk, but you also said the certainty you're looking for is 98%.
So the reason why we can do this is we have precisely a guarantee, a risk-sharing program with the European Commission that allows us to push the number lower. So the 99.98 is for commercial banks who have depositors' money. We can go much earlier, including taking commercial risk, not technology, but commercial risk. So there we can go much earlier. But this is the case only for EIB, maybe not for other banks.
Thank you. Pierre, what's the percentage for you?
So we're at the other end of the risk spectrum. So the percentage of risky businesses that we invest in is basically 100%. It's our job to underwrite risk, to underwrite early stage companies, and to underwrite founders, in the belief that if this works out, it will be a very, very large outcome. In venture, you cannot lose more than 100% of what you invested. We're not making leverage bets. We are not structuring, exotic financial, products to boost performance. So we know exactly the type of risk we are taking, knowing that we cannot lose more than what we're investing. And so we're really geared, unlike a bank, which is really operating on the basis of managing risk. We are also managing risk, but instead of looking at the downside, we are looking and are geared toward the upside. So in other words, where Yaroslav may ask, what could go wrong, we ask what could go right, and what does that mean?
You probably also have in the back of your head, as you're pumping in the money, what could go wrong. I mean, it's not without a lot of thought. Oh, no, not in the case. Oh, your colleague here, Raphael.
I don't know what you think. I think that's a dangerous question to ask. I mean, I think we're paid to take conscious risk. We cannot take stupid risk. So, if we invest in a company, space company, and later on it turns out they violate the laws of physics, that would make us look very bad. But it's our job to take risk. And it's exactly what Pierre says. You ask yourself, the question is like, what if everything goes right? What will the world look like? And like Pierre says, you lose 100% of the money, but you can make 1,000x on the right bet.
And what time frames are you looking at?
So we usually invest close-ended funds with a 10-year life, and then you can extend for a couple of years, so we have to make it work within that time frame. That being said, I think if you look at the numbers, the average VC fund has an existence of around 16, 17 years. So it goes beyond that. So they have to extend. And now as those markets mature, there are ways to kind of extend the life of a portfolio or sell it, do continuation vehicles, that kind of stuff. But that's where we try to fit it. And admittedly, it's not necessarily kind of the right time horizon, because if you look at a lot of the most successful companies in the world, they've been around for a long time, and value creation has happened over a period of not 5 years, but usually 20, 25, 30 years. So I think it's top of mind for a lot of investors, and you're seeing more and more structures, either holding companies or evergreen funds, or even close-ended funds with lives of 15 years. I've even heard of 20 years. Mm-hmm. So that's changing as well.
Yaroslav, I think you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. It might be a little bit obvious, but this really demonstrates the thinking of a typical bank. We're looking at what can go wrong, because if a company is doing extremely well, we don't have access to the upside. And that's why also, by the way, for the product that we have, that takes much more risk, we also have access to upside. We do put in some revenue sharing or some warrant structures in there. And I can confirm that even in our portfolio, it's a small part of companies that generates a lot of return, and that allows to compensate for the losses of most of the portfolio. Yeah.
So then, coming from the investor's point of view, what can space agency do? What can be done in Europe to kind of engender and build this LEO economy that is the base of today's discussion?
Anchor customer, primarily, which is a way to finance the development of these companies in a non-dilutive way. And obviously, you can tap a lot of the infrastructure and the resources, experts, whether it's policy or tech or market. And so, certainly in our experience, agencies have proven to be quite helpful. Obviously, you need to navigate, some bureaucracy, but I guess it's part and parcel with, kind of dealing with these big institutions. So I think generally there is a positive engagement and an increasing willingness to support, kind of the ecosystem of startups, which wasn't necessarily the case even 5 years ago.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's also a matter of scale, right? If you look at what happens across the ocean, you take Musk and you take Falcon 9s and you take Starships and Starlink. This is all born from 4 billion NASA investment into cargo and crew transport. People always think this is commercial. It is not. It is a great entrepreneur, but the certainty was given through the initial upfront investment. There was a commitment by an agency, a civil agency, that has produced all what rocks the whole economy of space today, commercial and also on security side, to say that. So it's a matter of scale. Then you have Bezos and Amazon, and they will step up. We don't talk about it now. This is somebody has a lot of money. How can you compete with this? It is very tough we say the tendency is positive. I would agree. I think the word anchor customer, we say this in 10 years. That's nothing new, really. So it's a matter of speed and scale, and I think we need to be real on this, and we need to scale up. I think what we do on the cargo initiative now is perfect. It's exactly the good thing to do. It's 25 million, and it takes a cycle to get to the next funding round. It's the right direction. It is the right. Also, it goes upwards. But what is the speed by which you do this? And then to come to the end of the chain, why do you do all of this? It's not for the cargo vehicle. It is not for the astronaut. It is not for the space stations you may build. It is what you do inside. So, and then we get to the point, and it's not even in-orbit servicing, which is an economy also. It is about pharmaceutical and life sciences. It is about what is the benefit of what you do up in space for people on Earth. And if you do not have this narrative to the politicians, you will not get the funding to scale up. So we need, as the other biggest step next to giving certainty in big scale as an anchor customer, as a role of agencies, we need to completely work on an ecosystem build that goes beyond the space bubble, so pharmaceuticals and the likes. And I think this is an enormous opportunity, and I think this is why people are investing now. And we've seen it yesterday here at the New Space. There were examples that this is happening. Let's scale this up.
But to go back to the beginning of your point, you were saying the first anchor customer for Musk was NASA, 4 billion. 4 billion, Bernhard.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we don't have the budget, but we have nice examples. We have the Lunar Pathfinder first data relay spacecraft, which we enabled by committing to be an anchor customer, and also de-risk technology based on 50 co-funding. We have the cargo, where we become an anchor customer. The problem is, And we have a Moonlight program, communication, navigation, where we also spend 80% on investment into the service, and we will be committed anchor customer. The problem we have in our system is also that we get funding approved normally every 2 years. And the customer commitment should be taken long term to really unlock maybe private sector investment, because a statement is nice, but a legal commitment is stronger. And that's where we may have to think a little bit how we can change a bit our approval rules at the ministerial meetings. We do invest, I think, a lot on the service side. I think we're changing. Where we are not yet really investing, from my view, sufficiently is what you said. What are we doing with it? What are really the use cases? Currently invest maybe less than 1% of our program in enabling use case demonstration. I think that's where I think we could scale up, because in the end, if we develop the market, create more commercial demand, also the business case for the service provider will easier close. So that's why I think we need to pay some attention to as well.
Yeah, in the terms of, I've heard that question many times about how agencies can empower investment or industry, and I've heard the answer from industry as well many times. And it still stays in a level where, when we're talking about a European ecosystem, it's still way beyond our control, in terms that there's very good pockets of people within the industry, either ESA or Italian space industry or Luxembourg, but they have structural problems, in the sense, organizational problems, I would say better. There are pockets of these people trying to do new things in a new way, facing the umbrella of a structure that is hard to change. Sometimes they're also in their silos. We all know there's many ESAs. I mean, that's the running joke. There's many ESAs, so they don't talk to each other. And on top of that, there's a system of geopolitical return. There's a system of structural difficulty where it's hard to push this forward. So what I'm trying to say here is that these kind of questions definitely need to be taken into a more politics, I would say, level. Because as much as we can do as industry, and trying to find these little nuggets of pockets of people within the industry and agency that want to do things different, the huge amount of push down that we face, and we've seen it with some of our clients, it's really tremendous. And so it's almost great, all these companies that are doing well in this environment.
And so maybe following on a similar thought, I feel a little bit like maybe we're singling out the agencies and putting them on the spot a little bit too much. And okay, we're at an ESA event, I understand this. But let's not all forget, and maybe not everybody in the audience is even aware, like if I look at the US, and everybody is aware that especially in infrastructure, we are clearly behind the US, right? But that's not because that's not only because NASA is spending a $25 billion budget. That's also because the US Space Force is spending a over $30 billion budget. And that's by far not the only military connected entity in the US. So that is actually the bigger part of the difference. And you know, ESA, I interact with ESA on various levels. We have, thankfully, various grants. ESA is doing a great job. Like, I really have to say that. But there's only so much they can do, and I think this is partly what you meant. We have to take this also to a European Commission level. And governments in Europe, in my humble opinion, have to start coordinating. Maybe we do need a more coordinated defense policy. Maybe Trump is right and we should step up. Everyone should step up to 3% spending on defense. And then we would have more money for space and could replicate at least some of the things we have in the US.
And also interagencies, because sometimes you have great capability that can be also used within an agency in a country that is misused. So the client is there, but they don't connect the dots.
I would like to turn to you. We've used the magic word defense. What are your views at ESPI on how this can really disrupt the market, the European market for the LEO economy, bringing it back to the topic for space?
Yeah, I go back to yesterday and I said here that there are two things really that define any space power. One is human space exploration, the other one is security and defense. The two budgets in the US were mentioned, and this is making the case. We are great in space applications in Europe. We are world leading. That's perfect. But we need to ask the question, what about the other two? And it is also wrong to believe, and I think the point was just made, that exploration is a different thing. What do you believe will happen on the utilization of what is developed by this? It will be dual in use. So there is also intrinsically, if we spell it out or not, but there is a link between what is done in exploration, even going to the moon has a notion of security and defense in it. So I think one of the mega silos, and that is not just ESA or a country, the mega mental silos in Europe is that we separate the one from the other when you cannot separate it. It is a duality in innovation, and when you talk about security, I think there's also lots of security that is not military. It's about critical infrastructure. We will be faced with new threats we didn't have. It's not conventional conflict. And the task is not so much to get the perfect European governance, because we tried this since 20 years and it's a hard job. And if we continue to try another 20 years, many things will have changed around us. So we will need to step up with what we have and who we are. I take Luxembourg, I said it yesterday. Luxembourg has a GDP investment percentage in space. If all European countries had that invest, we would have an annual spend on space of 40 billion, 40. Today it's 1.4. That gives you an idea. So, and space is not really expensive compared to other sectors like pharmaceutical. We may think it is expensive. It is in a way, it's taxpayers' money. We need to be careful. 85% in fact are taxpayers' money, despite private invest. But I think we are too much trained in the perimeter we used to grow up in. And as we step up to pharmaceutical and others, I think we also need to step up in what we are ourselves. And the scale up is an important work. Scale matters. And the European economies today still have the economic power to do this. Still today. We have the talent to do it. We have private finance increasingly doing it. We have industry that can do it, and let's just do it.
2 points there. One is you talk about, which I think everybody in the room knows, the duality of space. But there's a regulation issue here when it comes to perhaps the first customer base, which will be ESA.
I mean, dual space is a topic which is discussed since a long time, but I think ESA is investing in many activities and running many programs with dual-use applications. So I don't think that's necessarily a roadblock in the application area. Everything we do has dual-use application. And I agree, space exploration has the same dimension sooner or later.
When it comes to the word defense, I mean specifically.
ESA has no mandate today to do anything defense directly, but we are basically developing capabilities which have dual-use applications.
Very, very, very political answer there. Excellent, Bernhard. I want to move to the money then, because you mentioned a number of times, Pierre, scale up, scale up. So what are the problems? Why can't we manage it? Why is it such a topic of conversation then, and what can fix it? I put this to all of the money people.
Yeah, I think it's a vast subject and there's a lot to unpack here. But I think at its most basic, I think most observators would say that we are in short supply of capital at the scale-up stage. So I think for European companies, whether it's space companies, but also deep tech companies bringing breakthrough innovation to market, there's no shortage of early-stage capital. There's no shortage of subsidies and grants, and now you can debate whether the mechanisms are really that efficient. But generally, the companies manage to raise the first few millions, or even the first 10, 15 million. But then, as you get into the later stages, and these companies start needing significant amounts of money, I mean, multi-dozens of millions. There's, the investors, at least on the private side, are very few and far between. I can probably think of fewer than a dozen, maybe 10 European funds investing at the scale-up stage, so who have the capacity and the ability to write 20 million plus checks into companies that actually take a real interest into space, but other breakthrough innovation. They'd rather invest it in fintech or dog walking apps or whatever. And that's the issue we're facing. I think the counter argument to that is, well, actually, there's probably too much money sloshing around in Europe and too few good opportunities. I actually don't necessarily fully buy that argument. It used to be the case that Europe was investing about 4% of GDP in innovation. It's fallen down to 50 basis points now. And so in breakthrough innovation, I think, again, the definitions can change. And so I think you don't see these kind of continental wide industrial policy and projects which have birthed, the likes of Airbus and those champions which actually really compete on the global stage. And in the case of Airbus, has been winning a lot. We don't see that. There's too much fragmentation, whether it's capital markets, we were talking about dual use and defense. Personally, I'm interested in a lot of our portfolio companies are dual use. We started looking into European defense startups. I think the realization is that this is probably the mother of fragmented markets. Get the French DoD to buy a German technology, good luck. Things are changing. We're hearing that, because of external pressures, particularly the geopolitical situation, I think people are just really waking up to the new reality and what may happen into the future. So things are changing, but they need to change faster. And I think Europeans in general need to be a bit more patriotic and proud of what their continent stand for, because you meet a lot of investors, private investors, family offices, whether it's in Germany or Switzerland or France or wherever. They're more interested in parking money into real estate and property. And when you tell them about kind of sovereignty, strategic European industrial policy, energy safety, they just look at you and they're just like, I don't care about this. I'm going to invest in the US or I'm going to invest in property in Val d'Isère. So, yeah, I think US, they are a lot prouder, a lot more patriotic, and I think we need this type of capital to help us bridge the gap.
Well, I think you've come back to the mindset of risk-taking as well. With a property, they can see it. It's there. It's a piece of land. You're talking about something that's not quite as obvious for an investor.
I think that's true. It was definitely true 20 years ago, but I think venture as an asset class has kind of proven that it can deliver results even in Europe. It's still not as mature an asset class as it is in the US. It's not as deep a market as it is in the US, but I think if you look on average, I think other friends are EIB and EIF are running the numbers and seeing the, what it looks like over a longish period of time. It's actually pretty attractive. So I think if you can do this, do a financial return, generate a financial return, and at the same time do something that really advances, Europe's interests, I think it's good.
Raphael.
So I agree with everything Pierre said, and then I would add another sort of, let's say, call it issue that we have in Europe is there still is a clear preference to, when there are contracts awarded, the clear preference is they go to the big existing primes and not to startups. So the last example of that was the European Secure Communications Constellation, the so-called IRIS Squared. And frankly, that was the same in the US, right? 10, 15 years ago, everything went to like Lockheed, Boeing, and it took someone like Elon with all of his grit to break that. And people kind of forget that how often Elon actually sued the government to break that stranglehold. But in Europe, we are still in that stranglehold from what I can see.
Jose.
Yeah, no, because the question was like, what's the obstacles for scaling up European or space companies? And I understand the funding is a huge component of it, but when it comes back to markets, which is what we see in the vertical of testing, research and manufacturing low Earth orbit or low Earth orbit infrastructure, the market, it continues to be the problem. Because all these companies that are looking for funding, they also spend very little in the actual creation of new markets. Because space hardware is so expensive and so cash exhaustive, they have very little resources left to actually, on top of that, go and create new markets. And so I still believe that what we see today, both in the US and in Europe, is an inflection point where we start to turn that around, but we definitely need to create, and I know this is a buzzword, the customer-centric approach. So because it links into the investment opportunities, whether it's coming for public funding or private funding or any other type. If there's a market and you can tap into it and you can produce something of value with a customer, then you are much way ahead. And I think that's really what is missing right now. It's been missing, and we've been trying to be part of that solution, but we're a very small group of people trying to create these new value propositions. So imagine yourself how you go from nothing to something. And the ISS National Lab did it, from 0 to 200 million of private commercial companies, like Target, like Budweiser, who would never thought had anything to do with space. We still go to the same usual suspects. But I don't blame industry, I don't blame agencies. We go for the low-hanging fruit there, but then we start need to think ahead, because there's going to be a demand, it's going to be an offering from all this, Leo, and the market is not going to, again, it's not just going to jump because there's this offering. We need to create it now and put more effort into that.
Ludwig.
Yeah, there's a lot that could be said, really. The main point is that we usually tend, like now, often to talk from the inside out. We look into, I call it supply-side logic. So we do something better, we optimize more between nations, we do the right thing, what we construct as engineers. And we should do that. That's the capability. It's like a rocket. And a space station isn't different. It's all means. They are just means. Just means. What we really need to do much more, you said it, the demand side. Yeah, it may sound old-fashioned, but you really need to get the pharmaceuticals on the table. You need to get the automotive industry that is in Europe downsizing right now on the table. You need to get the energy people on the table. It is a hard sell, but it's the only way. And it will take its time, but it needs the policy awareness. And then we come to this macro discussion, which we usually never have, to really go out and get engagement with people that are not in this room. They are not in this room. They are never in this room. Exceptionally, yesterday we had the Minister of the Economy speaking, and Marc made the point that space is part of diversifying the economy of Luxembourg. That is the whole point. But how many countries get that point? How many countries scale up to that logic? And that's a major thing, and we need to reach 1 or 2 or 3 capitals in Europe to get this going. And if we're lucky, we do this before the ministerial of ESA, maybe with another government in that particular country. And if we do not do this scale, with all the efforts we do from the supply side optimization, better governance, it will not be sufficient. We will just be overrun. And that is not a detail. Just a few days ago, I was in southern France. There's a big manufacturer on the seaside, 1,300 posts in question. In Luxembourg, it is 80 today. Yeah, Airbus. And you mentioned Airbus. A perfect example, they built a super competitive aircraft, maybe the best. Do you think that the engineers who build aeronautics and the engineers that can build space in their capability are different? They are not. So we need the two. We need the supply side, the inside out. We are super trained in this. Let's continue and we improve. But we need really to add the demand side and the policy side.
Right, well, he's just pointed out there were the wrong people in the room. Nevertheless, I would like your questions. I've got some here on Mentimeter, but I would love if the people who've written on Mentimeter raised their hands and asked it directly, if you wouldn't mind. We have some roving microphones, I believe. So if you want to ask a question, just put your hand up super high because it's a dark room, hopefully not too soporific. And it's a question right here in the front row. If we can get a microphone to this gentleman. And keep your hands up so that the microphone can get to you, even while a question is being asked or answered, so that a mic can get to you. It will be. It will be on soon.
Good. Thanks, Marc Lange. Thanks for the panel. So the COTS program obviously was a big driver of US space success. I've heard discussions around every time a startup gets a big contract in the EU, like the exploration company recently, I hear talk around picking darlings, and that's not okay. What do you guys think about that? What should we do?
So the European COTS program.
But I'm not sure I fully got the question, but indeed, we have something very similar.
I think I can ask your precise question here.
Yeah. Yeah, as-if question.
Sorry,
sure.
Sorry, I just need to find it again. Here. What is the path towards a European COTS program? Doesn't need to be for launchers, could be for orbital tech. What can each of you do to enable it?
I see the cargo transportation service is for us also kind of a pilot project. I think we have taken significant steps. We have selected a startup, as you said. That was not an easy process to get this insured. And I think it was a very competitive process, by the way. It was fully professionally implemented. But I think we use it as Pathfinder, and I think we see more of those activities in the future as we move forward in exploration. I already mentioned the Moonlight program, which is about communication navigation, is a bit similar. Also, the commercial degree is maybe not as strong as for cargo transportation. So I think now also when I look at our strategy, Explore 2040, that we see more of those activities whenever it makes sense to procure service. I also must say procuring a service is very good, but it's not always the right tool. For me, procuring a service makes sense if there's a true market. If you procure a service and the only customer is ESA, it's not a good business case, neither for ESA nor for the company. So we need to carefully reflect about when a service procurement makes sense.
Any further comments on this?
I mean, definitely. There's a relationship component, there's a marketing component, and some people know how to play. There's many companies that suddenly get a lot of attention with just a sketch of an idea, and there's nothing below. There's no substance. Time will tell. It does hurt a little bit the credibility of the whole ecosystem when it doesn't realize, but we're not there yet. We don't know if they will be able to deliver what they promise. So I think we have to be patient. I've been pondering that question a lot, and I think what we can do is just support them, because if they are getting those opportunities, both from the finance perspective and from the technological help, we have to support them, because we can be bitter and just start pointing fingers and names. Back to your question. And so we have that option. But I think at the end of the day, we have to support them and really try to empower them if they're in that position, and maybe learn a few things from them, because I've been saying this for years. Space industry has been really, really bad at communication. We're really bad at communicating the great things we do, the actual great things we do. And so that gives a space for companies and projects to take advantage of that empty space that we have left, not filling it with the great actual real achievements of space. And I think we need to learn also from that experience.
Again, I think it's the right thing to do, and you said it's a good example, and we can apply it elsewhere, I hope. Then the question is, how do you scale it if you go successful? And then the question is, who really will be big enough to take the next step up? And then you go back to square one. Then you need the requirement somewhere, or you need the case. And in the US, you explore the universe. This is NASA, and the other one is security and defense. Those are the big raison d'etre. And we need to fill that vacuum here to pull us up. We come back to the point I'm trying to make here. It's really on the demand. And I didn't want to say, and I don't think I said they're the wrong people in the room. It's half of the equation. This is supply. And we need the demand in the room. Mm-hmm. And the demand is not only the user, it's the politician also, the ministry.
Well, we'll add those to our guest list next year. We've got that marked, okay? Any other questions from the floor? Yes, here.
Yeah, thank you. To all the panelists, my name is Isa. I'm doing research on the European economy, and we've been comparing the European economy a lot to the US now, and maybe I can say we're catching up a little bit. But I was wondering if all of you, both from the agency as well from the market perspective, what do you see as Europe's strengths or our competitive advantage when compared to other space economies?
Raphael has the microphone closest to his mouth.
Yeah, I have a very specific view on that, which is not always popular. I think on infrastructure, I'm honestly not sure we can close the gap. But Europe, but in my humble opinion, we're now moving actually from a focus on space infrastructure, so launchers, space stations, even satellite constellations. We have a lot of that infrastructure now. We can go to space regularly, cheaply, reliably, right? Primarily with SpaceX, okay. It's now time to actually think more about applications, like what what can we do with those space stations, with those satellite constellations that produce data? So what we call downstream, right, in the space sector. It's basically about applications. And if you come back to LEO economy, and things like interesting use cases for life sciences and material sciences, if you take life sciences, Europe has some of the biggest and best life sciences companies in the world. Like, I'm based in Switzerland. We have like Novartis, Roche, and many others. And that knowledge, that talent base, that's there. And so, I think we could try, hopefully, to build some really good space applications companies out of Europe, which are less capital intensive. So you kind of don't have that brutal advantage the US has on capital intensive companies.
Would you like to add to this?
No, I think I fully agree. I think we talked a lot about scalability, and we have scaled in Europe a bit the institutional budget for exploration. Each ministerial meeting you get more money, but we're still far behind because we're still scaling slower than in the United States, so we are still not really picking up. There is maybe a little bit more growth, but I think that's more driven by political motivation for autonomy, which is also very important, autonomous access to space, independence, and so forth, strategic independence. But where we could scale is successful indeed is if we create more application, more demand. That could be a huge scaling factor. I hear often that, we have all these pharmaceutical companies, they can do it commercially, they do it by themselves. I think we need to think about how to do it. I think it will not happen by itself. I still think there will be a significant institutional support required. We see that most of the innovators are small startups. I don't see many big pharma companies knocking on our door today. I think we need a startup to bridge the world between the big pharma and us. So I would wish ESA, the Commission, national agencies would invest more in enabling the demand push, because I'm convinced if we grow the demand, we could be as important easily as the United States. If I look at the scientific utilization of ISS, before we talked about commercialization, ESA was at least as strong as the United States. So that, I think on the utilization side, application side, I would even say Europe could lead, but it requires institutional support. It will not happen by itself.
Yeah, and again, the word applications and downstream, we're talking since 20 years. This is not new. But as we heard, it is 1% of the invest of a program. Mm-hmm. And the program is infrastructure focused. And then an investor may say, I just invest in the company that makes benefit and I don't care who I launch with and what station I'm in. That is fair for an investor. I think it's not fair for European strategy. If you want to have autonomy, you want not only autonomous access, also autonomous use, so that the cases you build, the industry you build, they do not depend on a president that will tell you don't fly tomorrow. So I think we can boil it down to scaling on the right side, and this is the demand side, and put it into programs in a ministerial and in Brussels, where this is not just an alibi heading, but it's a true heading of a program, a holistic program, that on one side has the finance and the talent. In the middle, it has the capability, what you build, but on top, most importantly, it has the policy and the use, and that includes pharma as one prime case here.
Well, pharma is getting a large mention today, which makes me happy. Any other questions from the... Yes, here, gentleman here. Maybe you can shout out, the microphone's coming your way, I think, or maybe you can say it in a loud voice.
Yeah, okay. Right. I think there were several mentioning about engaging with the demand side from Mr. Hermann Ludwig Möller, and also customer-centric approach mentioned by Mr. Jose Salgado. I think that's a very pertinent point. It is at the end of the day. Like, I'm from the space industry. I think most of us here are related to space in one way or the other. So whenever we come to the space industry, it's usually a gathering of space industry professionals. And I'll just always wonder, like, is there something, is something a structural obstacle, or something preventing it at the deeper level from engaging with other industries? Is there something that's blocking participation of or promoting cross-industrial dialogue? Are they not responding to our emails, or is there something more structural level that's preventing them from coming to the table? Just wondered if you have any thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, number one, they don't respond to emails. So yeah, you get that right. Here is a process. And when you were saying that the people who need to hear this message are not in this room, well, we go to a lot of biotech, agriculture, a lot of materials, and we are the only space people among those. So it's been a couple of years that SCM decided that we're going to really reduce the number of space events we attend, because we definitely, our day-to-day work is not here. So we've been approaching and attending with our clients, taking them outside and right into the ears of the people. Now, the process to get that is that, number one, the case studies. We really need to bring the knowledgeable people for applications. So the scientists, they need to be talking at that first level. And the thing with the applications is that while we have a heritage since the shuttle and since the beginning of space exploration in activity in lower orbit, some of it's private, or most of it is private. So the IP, the results get published sometimes in papers, but while we have been able to make sure that we compile the best case scenarios, still a lot of that research in space, we don't have public access to demonstrate it to a wider audience. That is the component of communication. So it's not about communication at a marketing level, but also as a scientific level. So the good examples we have are the ones we are able to leverage. So that's why we see a hype in crystallization, for example, because we have done that activity since the past 40, 50 years. And that's why companies like Varda, for example, are doing that now with their own capsule. But there's many others. We saw Flawless Photonics doing, for example, the fiber dropping. That also has a very long heritage. And when we go with the non-space people, the conversion, we call it the value proposition. When you take somebody who has never heard about a space, they don't know. So we expect them already to tell me your payload and the form factor and what you need. But we need to be the ones going deeper and extracting that information from them. So it's a long, long process. It usually takes 6 months to a year to convert a client from somebody who we just met. So time is one.
Thank you. I have to, I have a big thing flashing at me saying we're over time, but just to take us into the coffee break, I would like to take your questions so that we can think about it and hopefully people can come to you and answer it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's more of a statement and a build on what Raphael was saying earlier on.
Statement is even better.
He mentioned, so Europe is doing okay now with regards to, Simon Evans since Blue Abyss, doing very well with regards to access infrastructure, which is great. The other category he mentioned was applications infrastructure, quite agree. But there's a third category, and that's enabling infrastructure. So we're building infrastructure that's going to be enabling technology and humans to travel to space at decreased risk and improve performance. And I think this is a category of infrastructure Europe needs more of to better compete competitively at an international scale.
You're using all the keywords there, aren't you? Thank you very, very much. Well, thank you so much to our panel. Thank you to everybody. Thank you. And now it's the coffee break, and we'll be back here in the room at 11 a.m. Thank you.